Hello.
Hey there.
I'm not sure I have sound. Do any of you hear me?
Bob, I can hear you.
Oh, great. I can
Loud
hear
and clear.
you. Thank you.
Hear you well.
Hi, Marlene.
Good evening. How you doing, Bob?
Good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Good.
And do you go by Andrew or Andy? I'm sorry.
Andy's fine. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Andy, how are you doing?
good. Oh yeah, anything but late for dinner.
But I'm bummed.
Yep. Okay, Carson's coming in, Carrie's coming in. Perfect.
Hello.
How's everyone doing tonight?
Hey, Carrie.
It's weird. We're on Zoom, so I know we're farther away, but this is like the closest I've been, like up close to everyone now.
It's nice to
I
see everyone's
know.
like face to face.
Yeah.
Carson, how are you?
Good. It's been a really good day.
Good. And Carrie, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you to get together. I just got swamped.
I figured that was the case.
Okay.
I would have put money on it.
Uh-huh. All right.
All right, let's see, Frank coming in.
Good. We haven't seen Rick at the last couple meetings. Any of you know where he's been?
He got back to me and said he is on vacation for this meeting.
Oh.
So,
Okay. And I know Bob Forsyth is not feeling well tonight.
yep, I just seen the email from him.
Okay.
I did not hear from anyone else, so I'm hoping everyone got the agenda and is able to join us.
Good.
Hi, Bob. It's Frank Armendariz.
Hi there. How are you?
Good, fine this evening. How are you?
Just fine, thanks.
Oh. All right, Pat Bradshaw and Susie Lacer are coming.
Good.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Pat.
Hey, Pat.
How are you?
All good, all good.
All right. Where are you coming in from tonight?
I'm down in Florence.
All right.
Kind of thought this was gonna be in person and I got an email yesterday or day before, so.
Oh,
But hey, it's a good place to be right now.
yeah. A little wet.
I don't think you're gonna get out of that anywhere right now.
No, I think you're right.
Okay, and here's Russ.
Good. Brian's here. Hi, Brian.
Teeter.
Good. Russ, good evening. And Bob Teeter, good evening. Hey, Bob, are you guys open back up again?
Tomorrow, yeah.
All right, good,
Yeah, we finished putting things back today.
excellent. And is it all, you said there was still some work to do inside the wall or something?
Yeah, they still got to do some more mudding, and then they're hoping to paint either Saturday or Monday.
Good. Try to keep the cars out of the building, would you?
Yeah, like I said, I thought about putting in maybe a roll-up door there, or rather
Yeah.
than replacing the wall. And
That's good.
Yeah.
Just turn that lobby into a parking lot.
yeah, like we got the space. Drive-in theater around here.
Yeah, really.
All right, and Dean Mitchell.
Good. Andy, your tie is a perfect match for the wall color.
Well, I kind of blended in.
Yeah, it's good.
So Bob, I am going to make you co-host for the meeting, so that way you can share screen and do whatever else
Okay.
as the chair. So you now have the authority.
I feel very powerful. Thank you.
If there's anything you need me to pull and put up on a side screen, I can too. So,
All right,
okay.
perfect. So, hi, Dina. You're
Hi.
muted, but hi.
Yeah. And again, I'm not seeing anybody else
So shall we?
looking in. Oh, I lied here. Mike just popped in.
There you go. I got it.
All right. Okay.
All right. So as soon as Mike's set, we'll get started.
I like Mike's exclamation mark on his name there. That's
Yeah.
That's good. Hey, Mike.
Hey, everybody.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully we'll see one or two more people. I have 6:34 on my watch. I don't know what other people have, but we'll call it that. So we'll call a meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate you being here. We have, once again, we have Marlene and Carson from Soderstrom, and we have Brian from Amoresco. And we're looking forward to hearing from them shortly. It might be appropriate for Andy or Frank, maybe just to say something about the last board meeting and what the decision was moving forward on this high school edition.
Could I jump in and get a quick roll call, Bob?
Oh, sorry about that. Yes.
Andy G, I see you're here.
Present.
Mike H, Mr. Orr,
Yes.
Bob Snedden. We don't see Bob, right? Bob Teeter, see you. Chris Chandler, she join us?
Haven't seen her.
Okay. Dina, I see you. Pat Bradshaw. No Reed, it looks like. I know Rick was gonna be gone, Bob Forsyth, Russ Pearson, we've got you here tonight. Susie Lacer. Susie, I see you, and Frank Armandares.
President, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And we have a couple of sets of minutes to approve, I believe. November 15th, let's start with that.
Actually, I'm gonna have to table those, Bob. This is my fault. Bonnie sent me minutes and I completely forgot to attach them for you guys. So we're gonna have to table that till next meeting.
Well, good, because I wasn't planning to admit that I hadn't read them. So
You're off
I
the hook.
looked, I'm glad to know I wasn't the only one. I was just going to go right ahead and pretend everybody saw them. So we will skip over the approval of the minutes and move to, let's go back to Andy. Can you just tell us a little bit about the last board meeting?
So again, at the last board meeting, now in response to modulars for the high school, the board has approved, again, the initial information and fact finding phase to go ahead and find out what our preliminary costs would be to do a banquet of 6 to 8 total rooms. Again, 4 being science classrooms, 2 being general classrooms, and the other 2, in essence, being the front office in either the south lawn or the north lawn to again create a secured vestibule entry into the building, and then have, in essence, the backside of that space be connected as a pathway either into the social studies hall or the library as the student passage back and forth to in essence, a new banquet of rooms for the high school.
And Bob, the only thing I would add is that the board was unanimous in that decision. And so pretty strong sentiments about investigating and moving forward.
And what does that mean in terms of they're going to look at costs next? Is that what I understood?
Right. We need to get preliminary plans, again, about site prep, module type and cost per unit to give them a rough estimate figure to see if this is something that they can do with funds on hand or maybe a small commercial loan. Again, and then go ahead with approval of the project. So again, we need a better cost estimate. I had just used, again, a base figure for purchasing the prefabbed buildings plus 30% general cost overrun for site prep and contingency. But we don't know where, again, a preferred vendor from that's already on a government contract we could purchase from, what their final price is now, because things are in flux all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And is it the sense of the board that whatever we do here could be folded into a bigger project in the future? Or did you get into that?
Barely. Again, this is step 1 to take care of an immediate need. And again, we don't know where we would be going with remodeling or rebuilding the remainder of the high school, but this takes care of 2 immediate concerns. Again, safety, security, proper entry for the public, and the additional classroom space. The bonus to this is that it does give us the ability to use the current main office downstairs for counseling center, getting counselors off of the top deck, and then allowing us to convert room 20 as a continual space from the counseling office through that small space there. So we can pick up another learning space on top of moving the counselors downstairs. And so we're trying to look for the greatest efficiency possible in that meeting structure. And so that's really where we're at, is jumping into, again, getting a good solid cost estimate. I know Carrie's already started dabbling into looking at who has an approved contract now for a vendor. So that would avoid us going out for the bid process. But we're gonna have to look at again, how durable and how stable, right? What's the quality level that we're searching for? Because again, I think anybody that has been around schools that knows that temporary buildings become permanent. And if you buy the temporary building beyond 8 to 10 years, you're just investing money in something that is falling apart. Is that if we're going to have something that is going to be the anchor for a remodeled high school, this needs to be, again, a project that is of enough quality that it will last at least 20 years to be that primary entry exit or another usable learning space if, again, a high school were to be totally remodeled.
Okay. And one last question. Did you all discuss a time frame for when the board is expecting to get some further information?
No, but the initial goal is to get them an initial cost estimate by the February meeting, the March meeting at the latest. We've been kind of swamped here in the offices the last 2 weeks doing nothing but COVID calls, contact tracing, putting out mass notifications again that are just, I think they're going to be de rigueur for the next couple of weeks. Because we're getting 4 or 5 kids showing up and then not feeling well and needing to go home because they swabbed positive. So
okay, terrific. Thank you. For the next item, number 3, recap of previous discussion. Marlene, shall we turn this over to you?
Yeah, that'd be great if you're okay with that. So we do have a little presentation for everybody. I know we're going to try and be expeditious. We're going to fly through here. We have an hour. Is everybody able to see the document okay?
Yep.
So this is the same agenda, just reformatted. So these are the key points we're going to focus on. This one right here, the high school edition. As you were going through and listing the scope, Andy, that they talked about, I'm like, yes, 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 yes. I think we're close. So that's good. So very briefly, the meeting discussions are often focused on what are our priorities, right? Again, we keep hearing student safety and security. We're trying to take this massive FAR scope and figure out how we're going to prioritize it and what we're going to do as first steps. It's all important, but what are we going to try and bite off initially? And a lot of what we heard was, kind of the approach of the stewardship of the buildings for the district and taking care of the building stock, if you will. So that often means the exterior of the building, what is impacted by the weather. We do in this process, we need to have a realistic expectation based on community support. And I think what does that mean? All the things that we've identified in the numbers we talked about, I don't think that's a realistic number that would be supported by the community to do all at once. So again, last time we talked about really focusing on that first step approach and trying to hit the priorities and then figure out how we're going to be able to do the rest down the road. So large scale, needed long term, particularly for the high school, and then the short term is what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to dive right in. The high school edition, I'm going to actually hand this over to Carson. And Carson, if it's okay, I can still present unless you would like to present or control.
You're fine.
What sounds
No,
good
go
to
ahead.
you? Okay.
So similar to probably what you guys are doing on your own, we want to look at some options for the additional classrooms and additional administration to kind of create a secure entry and really define that point of entry so everyone knew where to go as they came about. In order to fit what we've been hearing, 6 to 8 classrooms, we had to rotate just a little bit to fit within the existing parking. And then we tried stacking up in a module that a lot of factory built contractors we work with use. So they come out to the site in these pieces and then they stitch them together and then they finish off the interior. They come with some finishes, but there's some work that needs to be done once they're installed. With any addition that we do, we always want to include some additional bathrooms. And then there's some mechanical space and a janitor's closet, and all those little pieces that you need for a new school or new addition that you're putting in. And then we kept that same angle and extended up to create a new administration. So we'd bring everyone up to the front here and then create a secured vestibule. We pushed that back to keep the one window into the science lab, but that kind of creates a hidden entry into the school. And so we create a canopy out in front that everyone, when they first come into the site, they'd see that canopy, and even without a sign, I think a sign would be nice as well. But even without a sign, visitors would naturally be drawn to this parking lot, and they'd have some sort of visual connection to where they want to come in at. So I want to ask, is that kind of what you're looking at, or you think this might be another option to view, or?
Again, I think this would be another option to view. And I think it might be, depending upon the price, it might be 2 classrooms too many.
Sure.
Right, again, that's but again, this is directly adjacent to, again, that science wing and auditorium. It's on the opposite side. I think we'd additionally drawn it. Yeah. So again, this puts the entry on the north side near the art and the band rooms.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get myself oriented because I've been drawing everything else to the south, I think. No, again, that would be good. Or are we counter rotated on this? Oh, I see where we are now. No,
Yeah.
this is the south. I was looking at that square lot in the back. That's the gym. Okay, I've got it now. We're 90 degrees to what I would be thinking when I look at my old maps. So yeah. So again, so this is the primary entry that, again, where the buses are coming in the
Yes,
morning
correct.
on the south lot. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Again, without seeing where the gym was, I kind of lost my perspective until I saw the back parking lot. Okay. So again, yeah, and the only other piece that we had kind of drawn is that, again, kind of making this almost like an L shape, is that from the back, yes, from where your cursor is there, another covered walkway or passageway, so that there was a cycle through, from a main hallway or something. Yeah.
Sure.
So that way there was a student passage, secure student passage.
And we
from
often
there.
do that as well for the modulars. The way the factory built schools, a lot of times will pull
Yeah,
2 pieces apart, and it kind of creates a little hallway in the middle.
right. And so,
And it provides nice space for the students too. It breaks up that hallway. It gives them some little space for a breakout space inside.
right. Yeah, yeah. And so this would be, no, again, I think this would fit the bill. It looks like it clears our arc of the bus route, of the bus loop. So Mike, your thoughts? I mean, my drawing, I just made it almost like an L, but having that angled administrative piece up front eliminates what I think we initially kind of sketched up at the end of the meeting with a longer covered entry, and then almost a hallway on the backside of the admin. So no, this would be good, right? And so again, the question is, looking at different manufactured building producers, looking at, again, the best quality for the dollar.
Yeah.
And again, we have, a modern building on campus now. We've seen other school sites that have units from Blazer Industries. Where again, I think it's a little more stitched together, steel frame or wood frame units. You kind of design everything from the interior, and they just basically bring them together, ratchet down the corners, tie in the internals, and then pop a roof truss over it. So in a gross oversimplification.
No, you're good.
Yeah.
Carson,
Yes.
do I recall from previous meetings that you can't actually connect the new addition to the old building without risk of having to redo many systems in the old building?
So there's a few factors we want to consider. The mechanical systems, you'd probably want a standalone unit for the new addition. So a lot of these factory units, they come with individualized units, and that's what that orange bar in the middle is. So we're not going to tax the existing mechanical system. There would be some, want to make sure we can get the water out to there. There's not a lot of toilets, but there are some. So we want to make sure they have the water they need and the waste that they need to get rid of. And then the electrical system, Marlene, in your experience, are they often creating a separate service to that one addition, or are they pulling off the existing? Because I know it is fairly close to capacity right now.
Yeah, it can really go either way. Usually buildings of the age of this high school, we probably don't want to add this much load to the existing panels, and it would have its own panel. It may not have its own service. We may be able to kind of utilize the existing service and add a panel to that if there's capacity, or also worst case, if we need to have its own service for this. It really does kind of depend on the existing conditions of the building, but the factory built entity should be able to coordinate that either way.
And from the facility assessment, sorry, Marlene, don't mind me.
No, go ahead, Brian.
From our study, it did. The high school was recommended to replace the electrical panel, so that would be recommended if we were to do any additions.
Yeah, we're at
When
max
you, Brian,
service capacity.
yeah. So Brian, when you say electrical panel, are you talking about upsizing the service that goes into the entire campus and upgrading the feeder essentially for the campus, or replacing outdated panels, or both?
I'm not confident on the service. I think the service line should be fine. I think it's just an outdated service panel and adding more, breaker space and stuff like that.
Okay. Yep, that's easier, I think. Still significant. And then I think, Bob, to your initial question too, anytime we take and add and directly attach more building to an existing building that is already over area and doesn't meet current building code, we have to be very careful about that. And every area where that building touches, you're exactly right, it increases what we have to do there to keep the kids safe, for lack of a better word. So usually what will happen is, say we didn't have this corridor connection at the end, we would create a rated connection where this new building touches the old building, and it would be essentially a separation line that creates two independent buildings, so that if one were to catch fire, it wouldn't make the other one more dangerous and put it at risk of catching fire also. So that's one way that we can get around that. So if we were to add this, we would also be looking at creating some sort of connection. If it's just a canopy or a covered walkway, there's a couple little different things we can do about that. But generally speaking, you're right. Anywhere where we are touching the existing building and adding square footage and connecting, there are fire life safety implications. They're solvable, but they're there.
I have a question as well, if I may.
Please.
Is there, it doesn't look as there is, though I'm not versed in reading these. I know you can't see my cursor. There's looks like a corridor between the library and the new administration. Okay, and that exists currently in the new, in the school now. Is that going to be converted, as it's a series of small offices? Is that going to be converted into a corridor to connect to the new footprint?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
We want to have a connection down to the classroom wing so everyone can get there, and it opens up the administration too on the back side if you want to have, if there's some functionality that they want to be separated from everyone else, that can work out.
Okay.
And if, like Marlene's bubbling right now, if we want to include some library offices, we still could include those in the back side of the library where that little notch is at.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Carson, because Mike raised an interesting question there, because those little rooms are used quite a bit. So what were you suggesting could be done to make sure we don't lose those little offices?
So we are adding that 1,400 square feet of administration. Marlene, can you zoom out just a little bit? Do we have the old admin in the corner from where it is before? So I think we're about the same, we're even a little bit bigger than the existing administration space right now. So a lot of those functions are going to come over, and then some of the existing office spaces that were there before, they could take over part of the what is currently being used as the administration, or it could be used for counseling as well, is another really good option. So I think there's definitely a program available for it, but we didn't locate the exact spot it would go into.
Okay. Well, with the addition of the 6 new classrooms, now I'm looking at the classrooms that are now currently upstairs above the library. There could be room for those to come out, so we might buy some library space back upstairs, which could be a challenge for supervision, but it would be at least, thematic.
Got it. Okay.
So we did cost estimates for this based on this larger size. So I do have the spreadsheet open, and we can talk about what the impacts are if we go down from 8 classrooms to 6 in the overall cost. And I think, Carson, do you want to go ahead and start walking through
Sure.
The numbers? Okay.
Before you do that, I think I saw that Dina had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The only thing that I was noticing is that green space between the new classrooms and the existing ones. That looks very problematic to me as far as kids and
The
safety.
landscapes piece, I believe.
Yeah, there's just the space that's between the two wings that come out, that green space right there. That I would just see that as, we're always trying to not create spaces where kids can hide or be unseen, or other people can be unseen. And so I don't know if you've thought about that. That was just a comment.
Dina, I believe there'd be windows along all of those classrooms. So it wouldn't be a blind spot from inside the building. It would be from the library, but it wouldn't be from either the existing classes, and I'm assuming that there would be windows along those exterior walls of the new classrooms as well.
Correct, yes.
We need a light well space somewhere in that. But even if that were a security gate across there, for it to be a courtyard after hours, or something, but it needs to be, we need a light well somewhere.
And then Andy, when you say light well, are we talking about just making sure that those classrooms that are on either side of that have daylight from that space? That you're talking about?
Again, just making sure that we don't create another passageway in that gap and then put a cover over the top to make that part of a walkway. Again, walkway at the end or at the side to join in the back, so that way we just have, because again, I'm almost thinking too, again, this almost is, again, like a U-shaped building that would be built nowadays that would, again, have that central well for natural light.
Yep, exactly. I think probably the one thing I like the least about this layout is the impact to the daylighting at the library. There's not a whole lot of windows necessarily, but we are impacting them. There are still some, but there will be some impacts to that. So we may want to look at if there's a way to mitigate that with some borrowed daylight, even coming through from the admin across the corridor potentially. It's a long distance, but I think daylight is very important. I would agree. And I'm hearing again that very much that concern to kind of connect this to the existing building and not have two essentially exterior outbuildings with exterior doors and security risks associated with that. So we can definitely take a look at that too. Any other comments or questions on the plan that you want to make sure that we're tracking on before we move on to the costs?
No.
By this time, okay. Okay.
So when we start looking at costs, a lot of times it's helpful for us to break it down into individual components. And when we can do the factory built, it does save on costs. You can see it can drop that cost down by about 20% or so. So here we broke out the office and the vestibule and the quarter renovation spaces. The renovation clearly a lot cheaper at $175 a square foot. And then the classroom, we have 8 classrooms and that can drop down to 6. So that's going to help save some costs there as well. But each of these has an impact on what we're trying to do. And so taken together, it comes in at, I think the bottom, like a little under 6.5 million. And then the next page, we're going to show costs for the site development as well. And so if we are adding students, essentially what the city would see as additional students, they'd ask for additional parking as well. And we can review that versus how close you are to currently being maxed out. I think that's the one kind of piece we'd want to investigate a little farther. But then there's some earthwork and some storm water because we're adding impervious area to the building or to the site. And then there's the soft costs, and there's also that item there for green energy. Whenever we're doing work over a certain threshold, and this will be over that, the state will require us to include some costs, which is equal to 1.5% of the construction cost for some sort of green energy on site. And so we want to make sure we capture that as well and include that in what the final budget would be.
Harry, are you, I'd like to ask you, because that's a much higher figure than I thought we've been discussing.
Oh, it is, because we figured kids going in and out like through the front door with a passageway and not remodeling that corridor. And we had figured 6 classroom spaces, not 8. And again, the most updated figure we had for cost per square foot for the actual units themselves was like $350 a square foot. And obviously they have a more updated, they've got a 2022 figure. And again, we didn't account for additional parking spaces. And so, yeah, so this is, I mean, we figured on the outside, it might be 4.5, 5. Right. And so even taking it down to 6, we're still talking 8. So, and there's a large soft cost contingency in here too, that again, depending upon how lean the board wants to run this, again, another piece. And
my wheels are definitely,
go ahead.
As I say, my wheels are definitely spinning, Bob. I think, obviously taking a little bit closer look at this, but my first thought is we may be wanting to look again at going for a small bond, because if with the contingency that we got the $4 million match, because if we were able to get a $4 million match, take on, what would be $4 million cost to us, we could almost turn around and pay that off really quickly. So that would be one strategy to maybe secure some additional funds. But I'll definitely put together all of our resources that we have now that we could dedicate, all of the potential grants out there and whatnot. And I can come back next meeting with some better options for us to look at to, maybe some loans. Maybe I'll talk to see what a loan might look like, and just so we can kind of see 360 what all of the funding options could be on this.
It also occurs to me that with the reason that Mike brought this up in the first place has to do with timing. And if we were to be looking at a bond, we're also looking at a pretty significant delay. And I think the real need would be to have this in place in September, but that's not looking very possible. But beyond that, I think we were talking about maybe second semester. So maybe Mike, you can address the timing a little bit too here, because I think that's critical.
You're muted.
Sorry. I've already resigned myself to the notion that we're going to have to create room through a different mechanism for next fall for the big influx of students. That said, that's going to be a multi-year challenge where we have those big classes moving through. So even if we're not fully ready for it next year, or knowing that we won't be fully ready for it next year, I'm going to have to make some other changes, moving some rooms around and some making some adjustments to the layout and the floor plan of where classes are located. And Bob, I'd ask please that I'm speaking now about plans that I haven't talked to people who will be affected by those changes. So
Understood.
I'm not ready for that conversation yet. So I appreciate keeping that under the lid for the moment.
Totally fine.
And Bob, I want to throw some info in here. You know, that $8 million is strictly for the addition to the high school. Am I not mistaken?
That's correct. This is just this one planning piece.
Yeah, so it's,
presentation will talk about the facility assessment work.
so I'm worried that we're focusing too much on that $8 million, because if we're adding to that high school, that means the high school is not moving, and there's some serious need at, you know, the water heaters, the current HVAC system at the main building. You know, there's lighting issues, there's control issues for the HVAC system and fire system. So that $8 million is good for the addition, but what about the remaining existing building that you're not now removing for the next foreseeable future?
So speaking of that, we do have the next couple slides on that very topic.
Perfect.
Thank you. That worked out perfect.
Well done, Brian.
Yep. Nice segue. I'm going to go step backwards just a little bit and say, just for grins, I did go through and update the budget estimate to include $350 a square foot. That changes this bottom line number with 6 classrooms down to $6.2 million. The one thing that's really hard for us to estimate is these factory built projects. They're very subjective. The price swings just based on time and the workload of the specific builder. So that's our experience. It has gotten higher because of the current market. I don't want to end up giving you a number that's too low at the beginning. This is a conservative number that we feel comfortable with, but it's certainly possible that they could do it for less. I just can't guarantee that. So we're trying to start with what we're seeing most recently, and there may be a way to get this down as far as a cost per square foot in addition to a slightly smaller building. So that's our disclaimer. So from the beginning of this process, we sort of broke the scope that we've been focusing on into 2 buckets. You know, one was the planning scope that we talked about. What do we do with the high school? Kind of the big picture pieces that are more strategic. And then we started this whole process with the facilities assessment scope and what we're calling our critical needs information. So when we listed everything out that we identified that needs help, we'll say, that was the total $36.8 million. Do it all, it's almost $40 million project cost. What we did for this exercise is we had a starting point and say, okay, based on the feedback that we've gotten to date, and what we've heard and what we know of your buildings, we're going to recommend a strategy for what to start with. And this doesn't mean that this is all we're going to ever do, but what this does mean is these are what we feel is a way to prioritize that entire almost $40 million list down to a manageable piece. And here's what we should start with. So we actually pulled it down to 3 key categories, and mechanical systems is the number one. We really do feel like, obviously, with COVID, as well as with the age of the systems in the buildings, that's something that is of a scale that we need to try and capture as part of this planning process. The other piece goes back to the kind of maintaining your building stock and taking care of your buildings and stewardship, and that's exterior envelope. So that's siding, windows, roofing, primarily the outside of the building. And then the third one, which is fairly minor in scale, but I think critical based on the use of the building, is accessibility, making sure that each of your schools have areas in the building that have accessible restrooms. The entries generally are in pretty good shape, but making sure that that is taken care of. When we just focus on those 3 categories, and again, this is independent of what we just talked about with the high school addition, the project cost that we come up with is $17.3 million. Still a big number, and we're going to go through and just kind of walk through a little bit of what that looks like. So this is where we started. That's the $36.8 million. This is everything identified, every category. And you can see the mechanical is a significant number, especially for the middle school and the high school in particular. Exterior envelope for the high school gets pretty high. I think the roof is a big driver for that. It needs a lot of work. That is something that we maybe want to evaluate based on that campus in particular. So these yellow areas are ones that we've pulled out of the overall scope, and we're saying these are what we feel are the priorities that we want to try and target getting done initially. So you can kind of see what we're not doing. So for example, Brian, when you talk about the electrical capacity of the high school, there's $600,000 in scope in there to upgrade that. We have not included costs for that. There's almost $750,000 for plumbing for the high school also. We have not included that. And there's quite a bit in interior finishes. Yes, they do need it. We're just trying to prioritize. These are all needs. So where do we start? And then we'll just go through just quickly on the list. I know, see where we're at. We're 40 minutes in to our hour. This just kind of talks through what that number represents. These are all project costs, so they do have that 35% soft cost included just to kind of help track. We'll break it down by school. Exterior walls and windows, roofing, bathrooms, and then the mechanical controls and testing and balancing. Pretty much everything that has been recommended by Amoresco for the mechanical scope for the building. For the middle school, it's repair of the exterior brick where it's had some water damage, repair the roof, not replace it, but repair it. The work on the mechanical units that Amoresco recommends, and the mechanical controls, testing and balancing at about 1.5 million. The high school is the lion's share of the costs. And again, this was our approach. We get into the logistics of how much money do we want to put into this school. It's the highest need, it's the biggest building. There's other issues, but this 11.5 million is represented by the exterior siding work, windows, roofing, bathrooms, mechanical units, controls, and testing and balancing. And then we do not want to forget about the district office. It's not a significant amount, but I think it's important to, again, maintain the building. So minor amount of work on the exterior walls, a little bit of repair for the siding, I believe, windows, roofing, bathrooms, and then at a much smaller scale, the mechanical system and testing and balancing. See where that gets us. So trying to pull it all together into one sheet. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy. So all of those costs all together, about 17 million and some change. If you throw in what was currently the high school edition at 9 million, I think with the 6 classrooms, we're down to closer to 8 million. You end up with a pretty good size number pretty quickly, 26.6. Again, that would probably be closer to 25 and some change with the 6 classroom version, right? So the goal of this meeting is to figure out this piece, right? I think we can, the concept is here for the classroom edition. I think from the feedback we got, we're looking at a few minor tweaks to the layout and integrating that, but I think we're close on the intent. The real thing that we need to, I think, drill down on tonight is, what are our priorities? Do we want to spend, $11 million on the high school and take care of what are really the highest needs in the district? Or do we want to be more strategic, thinking about the future and the long-term viability of that school?
That is the big question.
Sorry, Marlene. I think this to me feels like also the board should be part of that decision.
Yeah,
I think we can come with the recommendation, and then I think that would be something the board would love to see to make sure that it's in line with their priorities as well.
And this would certainly be a bond. Am I correct? We don't have, or a loan. We don't have other. I know you had, Carrie, you had some resources, but not anything like this, right?
Not off the top of my head, but I am going to definitely get to work doing some more digging.
Okay.
So I guess for us, the first question is, taking the pulse of this group, how close do you think that is as far as the approach with essentially our repair costs, our facilities assessment scope? Probably 75% plus is going to the high school. It's systems, it's infrastructure, and it's building envelope. Is that the right approach? Do we want to look at paring back some of those things at the high school?
I think
that's
in
my
the
first
past,
question.
Marlene, in my opinion, I think it's a good start. It's obviously areas that come up of concern on a regular basis. I kind of see this as part of, the long range facility plan, in that the board we can put it on paper, put some costs to it, put our priorities to it, and then they can choose to defer, if the funding is not there. And that's kind of what's happened in the past. We haven't talked a whole lot of facilities with our board in terms of, the long range facility plan. Obviously, we've been working on that. So,
Russ?
Yeah, just a thing I'm wondering for Marlene or the other consultants. What would be the life of the new or upgraded mechanical system versus the anticipated remaining life of the building with those systems in it? And then number 3, is there any reasonable expectation that any part of the mechanical system could be reclaimed if and when the building fails and placed in another building?
That's a good question. I'm going to kick that one over to Brian, I think.
Yeah, I can't speak to the life of the building, as I'm not replacing the building, but typically in a lifespan of a public building, about 20 years into a building is kind of when you need to start replacing the components. Components fail and you need to replace it, full upgrade, and then you can extend the life to about 50 plus years, and then another 20 years, you kind of have to redo that. The expected life of the new equipment would be 25 years if you're preventative maintenance, being ahead of schedule on the maintenance and changing filters and just being a good steward of your equipment. You can certainly make that last a little bit longer. If you were to tear down the building, you could pull boilers out and domestic water heaters out, but you certainly couldn't pull the system as a whole out. You could reuse equipment as needed in that regard, but then you kind of get into issues of sizing. If you were to pull a boiler out of the high school, it's going to be sized for the high school, and you put it into a middle school or an elementary school, it might be too big, might overwork the system, might cause the rest of the system to be over exhausted. So that's kind of a tricky question. I mean, yes and no to basically every question you asked. The issue with the high school at this point is that the systems are beyond expected life. So you're getting into the critical situation where there could be a system failure, which would upset the learning environment for the students. You might have to shut down the school. You don't have any sprinkler system at the high school. If there were a fire, you're not going to be able to preserve your building because it will burn until the fire department gets there. So it's certainly advantageous to get ahead of this in the sense of fixing your system so you don't have to react and reacting to maybe major consequences and major costs that you can't afford right away that are critical to operations.
Chris has her hand up, and I just want to say, in moving over to her question, that this, of course, is, we also have a building that's not seismically safe, and there are some other major factors here. But Chris, go ahead.
Yeah. I think something that this pandemic has taught many of us, especially when we look at the influenza pandemic back in 1918, is how crucial fresh air is. Think about the fact that there were so many football games, and yet we didn't hear of any massive outbreak at a football game. They were outdoors. I'm thinking primarily, of course, college football. But I think you know, the New York Times has run some stories of pictures of kids back in the 1918 pandemic era where they were having school wearing heavy coats and blankets out on the decks of ships because they figured out fresh air is what's going to help here. And I'm thinking that that might also be something to really look at. I know it's expensive, but one big shared HVAC unit without massive scrubbing, or individual units to keep the spread of shared germs in the air might be a real selling point, I think, to the public, you know, saying, look, you know, we've learned some lessons from the past 2 years, and it looks like fresh air is a factor. So it's something I would like to look at, even though I know as I'm saying it, we're talking expense. But it could have helped in many cases, I think.
And this might speak to Carrie finding, pursuing other opportunities of funding. You know, a lot of our partners in Oregon and in Washington are using some of their COVID relief funds, their ESSER funds, specifically target to their HVAC systems because of that exact point. And it, you know, that those funds from the government, you know, are focused on indoor air quality, and an outdated HVAC system is not pushing fresh air and not pushing that air that's needed to protect the students. So I don't know how that plays or what, but that is an option.
I've definitely got ESSER funds on my list of potentials.
And to your point, Chris, I think that's really relevant. That was part of our approach with prioritizing the mechanical, is trying to get as clean and healthy air in there as possible, where I think the real challenge that has been true for the district from the beginning of this process is, you know, what is the strategy with the high school, which has the highest need? But, you know, I think, Russ, to your point of being able to put in boilers and systems, it's very expensive mechanical equipment on a building that maybe something would happen before the lifespan of that equipment is exhausted. You know, being strategic about moving the equipment, I think that is a good approach, but I also think that we would need to approach that project assuming that we couldn't do that and still make sure that that would be the right choice. That's kind of my mindset with that, because yes, it would be great if we could, but there are a lot of things that have to fall in place to make that happen. So I think as we're deciding on our priorities, you know, assume the more conservative approach that you will not be able to reuse what you put in the building necessarily. And if you do, great, it's a bonus. But if that is enough to kind of sway the decision, then maybe that'll help us decide.
Quick question. Quick question.
Yeah.
Are they making any systems like ductless heat pumps, which double as air conditioners, that could be individual for individual classrooms, taking air from outside, but also that potential for AC given climate change and how temperatures are increasing?
Yes, that would be a great solution. I think that would be a good fit for the addition of the high school, as you know, each individual room has an air handler unit and it's all, you know, individualized. The challenge with that though is, you know, buy new and, you know, come 20 years, you're going to have to replace every single one. It gets challenging on maintenance. Poor Reed, he's going to be running around trying to fix everything all at once. But yeah, I mean, I think that is a cheaper option. I think it's worth exploring, but there are pros and cons that are worth exploring.
But they definitely are energy saving as well. So perhaps there could be some cost savings.
Yeah, they're much more efficient than an outdated HVAC system.
I was under the impression that ductless systems did not provide fresh air, that they only recirculated air and had some minimal filtering capabilities. Are you telling us that there are units available that will actually bring fresh air from outside of the building into the building now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
I think that's a question for Brian. So that's my understanding. It's essentially a version of a unit ventilator where we have a direct kind of louver from the outside to bring in fresh air. The problem is it's a unit that supplies in the room at the source rather than like a ducted solution that would have a supply and exhaust, right? And give the air that's in the room a path out. There are some strategies with some low air return grills that can try and move the air, if you will. You can even use fans. Ceiling fans is another option. But the performance is going to be very different than a fully ducted system. I think you're right, Frank.
Yeah. We have Pat, and also, I don't know, Chris, are you
I'm good.
raising your virtual hand there? Okay.
I'm good.
Pat, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna jump in there on the little unit ventilators. We have those over in Bethel, and we've got some that take the outside air. I haven't seen a heat pump that's, actually, we do have one that's draws a little bit outside air. But it's not a real common thing. Usually on ours, we feed them all with hot water from a boiler system and then pump it out that way. So
I would love to get a sense of some of our committee members about the idea of are we, if we go with a proposal in the range of 25 million, what are your thoughts on what that does to our future goal, or at least the one we've talked about of replacing the whole building? Who would like to address that question?
I think it makes it very hard to present what would be two bond measures to our citizens here. We failed the last time, and it's part of why we are struggling now. I just don't see the sentiment being there to, unfortunately, I don't know how we go about changing that. Go on the road.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a tough social environment to advance school measures in right now.
Yeah, and again, even with this project, again, I still think there'll be people that have sticker shock. Again, for here's what you're doing, here's what you're getting, and it's going to cost X. And so again, looking at, again, for the immediate need, trying to take that on as one piece, as either district funds and matching grants first, and then looking at a secondary bond for the remainder of the high school building, I think would be more palatable to the public, and definitely something that I think the board would entertain. Again, for the last couple of years, the sentiment of the board has been, I think, let's find a small project that we can do on our own without having to go to the voters to show success of concept, to build that confidence and to show that even with the high cost, we can still manage a project and do it well. And I think that's the impetus piece that'll be the only part that changes again, people's minds, because otherwise it'll be again, more one-on-one type meetings where again, we wind up debating with people in the public that just say, well, I have a car that's 30 years old, I put repair money into it. Do the same. And that's what kind of I think we'll get to is without having an anchor point to really move forward from. And I think that first piece at the high school, again, it is the anchor, or again, but that takes care of two needs, or it's looking at an immediate elementary project that, again, smaller, functionable, that can be done, fairly quickly, and then build support to go to the public for a bigger project that's comprehensive for the high school.
Carrie?
I was just gonna kind of piggyback off Frank's comment, about going on the road. I think having these priorities written down in paper, with numbers to them, gives us something to talk to the state about or talk to our community about and say, these are the things that are on the table, and we don't have the funds, directly to do that. And in my opinion, it's time, I know the state has the awesome grant and things like that, but it doesn't seem to be reaching the impact that I was hoping it would across the state. And so it's good to know this is my 10th year here as the business manager trying to tackle this high school, and we're still here where I was almost 10 years ago. And I think that's an important message when we're talking to, legislatures and things like that. So I don't
Right.
think, I agree. I don't think this is something we can get accomplished easily right away.
I think to me, there's a very big difference between saying, let's add these modular classrooms because we're spilling over and we've got to have more classroom space, versus saying, while we're doing that, let's put another 15 or so million into this and fix up some other things, because if we do that, what happened here? Hold on. I guess
Sorry, Bob.
yeah, something just happened. There we go. Because if we do the second part and do the repairs in the high school building, let me put that differently. It seems to me that if we put the addition on, we still have left ourselves the option of tearing down pieces of the high school building and doing it piecemeal in a sense. But if we spend 15 or so million on, or 11 million on the building, makes it much harder to come back then and say, well, we just put, a bunch of money into the building, but now we want to start tearing it down piece by piece. I just think there's a critical issue there that whatever we recommend to the board, we need to have thought that one through pretty carefully. Some comments on that? Russ, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. I definitely tend to agree with you. I wish we could go back to the last two bond measures and have a do-over and try harder, but we can't do that. But it just seems like a really uncertain environment. The escalation of real estate right now, costs of construction have gone up just astronomically. You all know we've got a bond project that's about to start here at LCC. It's $12.5 million, and we thought we were getting, a lot, and we're getting a little for our $12.5 million. The basic gist of it is, we're getting all the infrastructure replaced that we needed, which is great. But any classroom reconfiguration, paint, all that stuff's kind of gone by the wayside already, and it hasn't even started. Just the cost escalation has been that drastic. So just with all the uncertainty, I think, starting slow, starting piecemeal, trying to tackle it as much as we can internally within the district without a bond measure seems like the better part of valor right now, and see how things shake out over the next month, or not month, a year or so.
Other thoughts on plan A versus plan B?
Can I pose a question? And this is mainly for me personally, but if you are putting modulars at the high school, you're adding 6 more classrooms outside, and that is an investment in your building, right? So you're committing to staying at the high school for the foreseeable future, for the next 5 years. I mean, what is the timeline for your expectation of the modulars?
Again,
For me, I would say,
go ahead, Terry.
Keith.
No, it's
I
fine.
was
Go
just-
ahead.
For me, it would be when I think the committee feels like the community is ready for that. That would be for the next step.
If we were to move to ready for the next step, right? But again, the systems in the building are aging, and every month, every year, it's getting worse and more expensive. If we were to go to the additions, the building additions, the proportion of the bond, the $6 million, $8 million for the 6 classrooms, that adds capacity to the building. More students are using the equipment without addressing the equipment. It gets to that critical situation where the building is failing, but you're adding more people, you're adding more use to the building. So I guess from my perspective, it's concerning to not touch the mechanical, but still investing in the high school, or not touching the systems. So it's kind of it's a dual-edged sword. I mean, what do you do first? I don't have the answer. Certainly not trying to pose that, but just a thought, right?
What I'm hoping is that, I mean, to me, and I think we talked at the last meeting, if we put this addition on, we still have the opportunity to rebuild the high school in its current location, or maybe even move the modular. I don't know. But if we put $11 million into this, and I understand what you're saying, Brian, because I live in that darn building, and it's not ideal by a long shot, but I don't want to cut off the future possibility when the climate is right in the community to get the bond that would allow us to replace the high school. And I can't, if I was a community member and I had spent a whole bunch of money in taxes to fix up a building, I sure wouldn't want somebody coming back to me and saying, now we want more money to replace it.
I absolutely agree.
Well, at all. So I don't know the answer to this. Pat, you have a thought?
Yeah, I was, somebody asked earlier, can you reuse the water heaters and boilers? And yeah, that's just not going to happen. Your engineering just won't make that work. But if you did those modulars right, and I've been in your buildings once, but all your buildings are on the same piece of property, aren't they, for the most part?
Yes.
So you could go after this modular building thing. They're just doing one over at Clear Lake right now, a beautiful one. Head Start's doing that one. And if you're all on the same property, you could go after it as putting this in place, using it, filling your immediate need. And then as you develop your long range plan, that thing can be moved. And there's movers, we've moved things bigger than that. They'll do houses and stuff. And so if your property, if you have a use for it at another site, there is a feasibility where you wouldn't be throwing the thing out in the end. It could be moved over to another location on your campus for another need, perhaps. Just a crazy idea, but then you're not throwing it out. And that might be a good selling point to people, that you're addressing an immediate need and then still being conscious about the money that they're spending. And it's a huge undertaking. It'd have to happen in your bond, but when you're doing your new high school, that's when you're going to be in that, have the big money out there doing that type of stuff. So just an idea.
It's a good point. Bob, and then Carrie.
I've just been thinking about what, Chris had talked about with, addressing COVID and all this. There might be an opportunity here to do some marketing before we even think of going to the community for a bond. If we kind of do some type of marketing and press releases, about how we're meeting, addressing these needs, what's going on with the building. Everybody's talking about how do we move forward with COVID. Well, this could be a step in moving forward, and just kind of prepping the community to be in a position to accept a bond. And also, if we use this time to leverage other funds, if we're, Carrie's able to go to the state using COVID assistance funds or whatever to address some of these needs, again, showing the public we're doing all these things, that when we do go before a bond, we're saying, hey, this is the last ditch effort. We've tried everything else. You've seen what we've been doing over the years. And just keeping the community abreast of what we're doing here and all the angles that we're looking at.
Carrie?
Just really quick, some food for thought. I came from a district who community voted down the bond 3 times in a row, and it took literal system failures for it to finally become real to people. And multiple system failures. And so sometimes it's really hard to connect the need when you're not inside the building using those systems. And then I know Marlene has to put this facilities assessment report together for the state. And so I know she's looking kind of for a thumbs up from us if we think this is an acceptable plan again, with no commitment, to spending the money, no commitment to going for a bond. It's a plan there that we can work off of and keep those needs in our priorities right now. So, sorry, Marlene, I don't mean to cut in there, but to help you out, is that what you are kind of needing from us
Yeah, so the facilities assessment, I think we're in great shape on. That one's really just documenting what's there and the need overall. It's the long range plan piece, I think, and definitely. So we do want to try and get something in. We have until I think the end of February. So we do have a little bit of time. We'd like to get it as close to accurate as possible. And one thing in particular that we're sensitive of is this issue with the high school. So that is the one thing that I say, yes, we have a strategy that's can be a little bit more general if we don't have consensus yet or clarity, but I wouldn't want to put $11 million worth of scope in on the high school based on the discussion we're having tonight, right? What I'm hearing very clearly is, we have, I think, Bob, to your point, two different types of scope. We have very discrete new building that's attaching directly to the old building, and then we have systems costs that are spider webbing all the way through the existing building. Those are the ones that we're probably not going to get the money back on, right? The discrete ones that are up against the building, those are easier to capture, easier to potentially, as Pat mentioned, reuse, relocate. So yes, the long range plan and the scope and the direction and the recommendations, again, it's not a commitment necessarily, that would be ideal to kind of get that close, but I do want to have it be accurate. And I also don't want to put something out there that's going to create a political issue down the road if we are heading in the direction I hear everybody heading, which is really, the high school is not necessarily the right school, even though it has the highest need, it's not necessarily the right place to spend the money without knowing a little more about the longer term plans for it. So yes, ideally out of this meeting tonight, if we have some sense of where we want to go, that'd be great. But I do want to take the time to make sure that we get it right.
Yeah, I see your point. Let me see. I know, Mike, you had your hand up a minute ago.
I see the perils of investing so much now in an upgrade that will make it more difficult to get the next ask, which is either replacement or full-scale repair. I have to wonder if, as unsightly as they may be, we need to make a more modest ask for single modular classrooms not attached to the school to get us the temporary, or sorry, not temporary, but to get us the immediate need for space. And 2 to 4 more classrooms that are not part of a grander plan, not part of the long range plan, just part of the short and mid-range plan. That doesn't get me the new entryway, that doesn't do anything to increase security or customer service or traffic flow through the school, but it does, I think, have a big impact on instruction and a big impact on teaching and learning, which do resonate in this community. And I think if we're making modest improvements for the betterment of current kids, it's a little more tangible than making a long-term investment for the next generation of students. I think people who are currently enrolled in the schools, K-12, would all recognize a benefit from a short-term fix to the space problem.
What is, okay, let me ask it this way. Marlene, what is your time frame? In other words, here's what I'm thinking, because we're already 15 minutes over the hour that we promised. I'm just wondering if we were to get back together, give everybody a chance to think about this, come back together again before the next board meeting and get some thoughts after everybody's really digested these options. But what does that do to your, what do you need from us, if anything, tonight?
So I think we're good for tonight. I would agree. I think it would be great to have another opportunity to review this a little bit more in depth and come back. As long as we have time to I think it's important to present this to the school board before we submit it to ODE also as an opportunity. And I think that's, I want to say early February board meeting would probably be the next opportunity if we can get on the agenda there. So if we have enough of a sense of what we want to present at that meeting, and oftentimes, you know, this is still a planning process. So when we present to the board, we can say, we don't have clear consensus. This is where we're headed, and this is the general sense that has the most support. But we still have questions on some of these things. I think it's okay to say that there are some things we have not figured out yet necessarily. But if we have enough clarity that we're comfortable with sharing out, you know, a message from this as far as a recommendation and a direction at that board meeting, that would be great. So I still think there's time. It's tight. That's probably about 2 weeks from now, give or take. So even if we review this and touch base in a week, we can make some revisions and prepare for that. They usually need the information prior to the board meeting, so we kind of have to work backwards from there as far as when they need it. But
So our next board meeting would be February 9th. Our secretary would prepare packets on February 3rd to distribute on the 4th, ideally.
Yep. So that's exactly 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We would pretty much have
if
to
we were
meet next week then.
Yeah. Yep.
That would be my proposal, but I need to know if that's I mean, we don't normally meet that quite that frequently, but I think there's a pretty critical issue here. And Marlene and Carson and Brian, can you all make arrangements to join us for a meeting next week sometime?
Yep. Virtual especially is a lot easier, but if we need to be in person, we can, I think that next Thursday we can do too, but yeah, we can definitely be available.
I would propose that it be virtual. What do you all think? Do you think that's a reasonable approach to think and meet again next week?
I think, you know, you can hear Principal Harkleroad's concern. It's in his voice. So I think we need to work, advance with haste to the best of our ability. And I'd be available one day next week to be part of this meeting.
Okay, that's great. Let's just look at the calendar. Carrie or Andy, are there nights next week that you would not be available?
No, not really. Again, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are fair for me are open simply because if we're going to do this virtual, all my other meetings next week got pushed to virtual, even the ones that are late evening stuff. So again, if we go 6 or 6:30 Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm available.
Wednesday, can we do it Wednesday?
Yeah, I have no objection to Wednesday at all.
Any consensus?
Dina, are you good on Wednesday? I know you have a gymnastics night.
Yeah, I think that's Tuesday. Is Tuesday the big day for gymnastics?
I can't do anything before 6:30 is.
Okay.
Okay, so
And then I am involved in church youth group on Wednesday night, but I could probably.
I'm a teeny little cog in this wheel, but I'm at a event at main campus next Wednesday evening.
And why were we looking at Wednesday particularly?
Because Frank asked.
Yeah.
He was the first one with a suggestion. I said Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. He nailed us down to 33% of my spread. So yeah.
There you go.
Frank, you're not available on Tuesday or Thursday next week?
Thursday I could make.
I can make Thursday work too, because my other meeting is scheduled to be done at 6. So I can make 6:30 work on Thursday for sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
6:30 is fine.
What
Okay.
about 6:30 on Thursday?
Arlene and Carson, you guys good on that day?
Yeah, Thursday should work well.
That works. Mhm.
Great.
All right, I think that's what we should do then. We'll try to come back and come up with, Mike, does that work for you too, by the way? Get somebody come in.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
Mike, you're muted. Oh, he's talking to somebody else.
I'm sorry. Yes, we're still making COVID phone calls. So,
Okay.
what was the question?
I'm sorry, does Thursday next week at 6:30 work for you?
You know what? Because we're making phone calls tonight, next week opened up very nicely with a fewer sporting events. So yes, Thursday night works for me.
All right, perfect. Let's do that. Thursday at 6:30. We'll do it by Zoom again, Carrie. I assume Bonnie will be back. And
How's that for finding a silver lining?
What's that?
How's that for finding a silver lining in this mess?
Yeah, really.
I can squeeze in another meeting. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So for tonight, we'll adjourn and see you all next Thursday. And thank you very, very much. I think we're at the point of something really critical here, and I really appreciate everything you're putting into this.
Thank you, Bob.
It's been really good.
It's exciting.
Good night.
We're getting closer.
Good
Thanks,
night,
everybody.
everyone.
Okay.
Good
Have a
night.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Hey, Ian, I'm back.
And froze. Okay. End of meeting, 7:50 p.m.